The sky over Ashwood Valley hung heavy with steel-grey clouds, churning with the weight of the storm rolling in from the north. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, covering everything in a blinding white that swallowed the outlines of trees and hills. The wind howled through the pines, bending them like brittle matchsticks. It was the kind of storm that turned roads into ghost trails and left even the most prepared mountain dwellers double-checking their generators. Ethan Rose split firewood behind his cabin. Each swing of the axe clean, practiced, and efficient. He didn't look up when Ghost trotted over, snow clinging to the Malinois coat. The dog sat quietly, watching Ethan work with eyes alert and dark. The storm had stirred something in him, a restlessness. Ethan could feel it, too. He stopped, slung an armful of logs into a canvas carrier, and headed toward the cabin. Ghost followed, paws crunching lightly on the ice-packed ground. Inside, the air was warm and dry. The fireplace crackled, casting orange light across the wooden floor and the walls lined with old maps, faded photos, and a scattering of survival gear. Ethan was pouring water into a kettle when the knock came, urgent, sharp, nearly drowned by the wind. Ghost's ears perked. Ethan moved to the door, cracked it open, and found Grace Monroe on the porch. Her parka dusted with snow, face flushed with cold and worry. "Ethan," she said breathlessly, "I need your help." He stepped aside without a word. She entered, pulling back her hood. Her eyes darted around the room, settling briefly on Ghost, who stood silently by the hearth. "There's been an accident," she began. "A snowplow overturned on Ridge Road. I'm the only medical personnel reachable. The rescue team radioed. They need me now. You can't take Leela with you," Ethan said flatly. Grace nodded. "No chance. The roads are closing. And her seizures." She stopped, visibly swallowing back fear. "She hasn't had one in weeks. But if she does, she'll need someone who can stay calm. Follow instructions." "You're asking me," he said. "It wasn't a question. I wouldn't if I had a choice." Her voice softened. "You're the only one close enough. And she likes you." Ethan exhaled slowly. He hadn't expected this day to come. Not like this. Grace stepped outside and returned moments later with Leela, bundled in a bright red coat, her small face peeking out from layers of wool. She clutched a worn stuffed rabbit in one mittened hand. Ethan crouched down. "Hey, Leela." "Hi," she said softly, her breath a puff in the cold air. Grace knelt beside her daughter. "Leela, you remember Mr. Ethan, right? You're going to stay here with him and Ghost tonight. Mommy has to go help some people." Leela nodded, though she looked unsure. Her free hand reached for Ghost, who lowered his head so she could scratch behind his ears. "He's the best watchdog in the whole valley," Ethan said. "No bears, no snow monsters get past him." Leela smiled, just a little. Grace stood and looked Ethan in the eyes. "She has her meds in this bag. Dosage charts inside. If anything, I'll handle it," he said. "Thank you." She turned quickly, as if staying longer would make it harder, and vanished into the snowstorm. Ethan closed the door. Leela stood in the center of the cabin, still bundled, still quiet, coat off, he said gently. "You'll roast in here." She nodded and started peeling layers, revealing a Star Wars t-shirt beneath. Ghost lay down nearby, his eyes on both of them. "Want some hot cocoa?" Ethan asked. Leela hesitated. "With marshmallows? I think I can find some." He set water on the stove again while she sat cross-legged near the fire. Ghost shifted closer to her, his chin on his paws. She seemed to relax with the dog beside her, and Ethan watched them both for a moment before turning to the pantry. An hour passed quietly. Leela drank cocoa and read from a battered comic she pulled from her backpack. Ethan tinkered with the backup generator wiring by the window, keeping half an ear on the wind, half on Leela's breathing. It was deeper now, steadier. Outside, the storm raged on. The valley was being buried in silence and ice. Ethan's radio buzzed briefly, just static. Then nothing. He wasn't surprised. Communications would be out soon. He moved around the cabin, checking the extra woodpile, testing the emergency lanterns, laying out Leela's meds on the kitchen counter. When he came back, Leela was asleep on the couch, the comic slipping from her hand. Ghost lay at her feet, eyes half closed but watchful. Ethan took a blanket and draped it over her. For a moment, he just stood there, watching the firelight dance across her sleeping face. She looked nothing like his sister, but something about her, small, vulnerable, brave, made the room tighten around his ribs. He hadn't protected his sister. He'd failed her when it counted. But Leela was here now. And he wouldn't fail again. The storm howled louder outside. But inside the cabin, it was still, safe, for now. The wind had eased, but only slightly. Snow still pressed hard against the cabin windows, muting the world outside. Inside, the fire crackled steadily. Leela was resting again, curled up on the couch with Ghost lying protectively at her feet. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something subtle but undeniable. It started earlier that evening. Just after dinner, Leela had been coloring quietly at the table when Ghost suddenly stood up. Stiff and alert, he padded toward her, ears raised, posture rigid, not aggressive, but intensely focused. Before Ethan could say anything, Leela's crayon dropped from her hand. Her shoulders twitched, her face went pale. Ethan recognized the signs. He was at her side in seconds, lowering her gently to the floor, placing a pillow beneath her head. Ghost stayed beside her the entire time, a low whine escaping his throat. When the seizure passed, mild, no longer than 30 seconds, Leela blinked up at Ethan, dazed but unharmed. "How did he know?" Ethan asked, not expecting an answer. Leela looked at Ghost. "He always knows," she murmured. "Always." Later, after giving her the proper medication and making sure she was stable, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, sorting through Leela's small backpack. Grace had packed essentials, medicine, an extra sweater, a few snacks, books, a flashlight, but at the bottom, tucked beneath a folded hoodie, was a worn envelope sealed with medical tape. Ethan hesitated, then opened it. Inside were several documents, yellowed, creased, official-looking. The first was a page of medical notes, filled with terms Ethan recognized from his time in the field: neurosensory response, biometric pairing, canine synchronization. He pulled out a photograph. It showed a woman in a white lab coat standing in a sterile, high-tech facility. She was tall, serious, maybe mid-30s, with piercing eyes. One hand rested on the head of a Belgian Malinois. The dog sat alert, proud, and unmistakable. It was Ghost, or his twin. On the back of the photo, someone had scrawled in precise, clinical handwriting, "Test subject number 12 bonded to LM reassigned under Echo Protocol." Ethan stared at the words. Heart thudding. Echo Protocol. He'd heard whispers of it, never confirmed. Always denied. A black project buried under layers of military and corporate fog. The rumors were wild. Bioengineered dogs capable of sensing chemical imbalances in humans. Tuned to specific neural signatures. Some claimed the dogs could detect fear. Others said they could sense thoughts, dreams, even predict behavior. But it was always theory. Nothing Ethan had ever seen firsthand. Until now. He looked up. Ghost had returned to Leela's side, resting his chin on the couch cushion just inches from her hand. The fire cast a faint glow on the dog's scarred muzzle. Ghost had always been unusually intelligent. But this was something else. Ethan reached for the rest of the documents. There were lab memos, research summaries, and what looked like an experimental logbook. Many entries were blacked out or missing entirely. But one stood out. Subject number 12 demonstrates advanced neurological pairing with human subject. LM canine responds to early signs of seizure activity before measurable onset. Behavioral synchronization observed under high-stress conditions. Transfer to off-site testing approved. Subject to be integrated into civilian setting under revised ECHO guidelines. Below that, a signature, Dr. Elena Monroe. Ethan froze. Monroe, not Grace. Elena. He looked back at the photo. The woman in the lab coat, she had Grace's eyes. Sharper, colder, but unmistakable. A sister, cousin, mother. He returned to the living room, where Leela slept soundly beneath a heavy quilt. Ghost shifted his head but didn't move from his post. Ethan sat down nearby, the photograph still in hand. "Who are you really, boy?" he asked softly. Ghost blinked slowly, then turned back to Leela. There was no doubt now. The dog had once belonged to the Echo Project. And somehow, he had bonded with Leela, or perhaps with someone connected to her, long before either of them found their way to this valley. Was that why Ghost had appeared half-starved in the woods last winter? Running from something, sent here. And if Ghost had been reassigned under civilian integration, had it been by design that he ended up near Ethan and Leela? Or was this all an accident? Ethan didn't believe in coincidence. Not anymore. A low hum filled the room, the generator kicking in. The storm must have knocked out the main power lines. He stood to check the systems. But not before looking one more time at the photo. Test subject number 12. That meant there had been others. He wondered how many, and what had happened to them. Outside, the storm began to shift, less fury, more weight. Snow still fell, but the wind was dying. In the quiet that followed, Ethan felt something heavy settle on the cabin. Not just snow, a truth, buried and now breaking through the surface. Echo Protocol wasn't a myth. And it hadn't ended. It had only gone quiet. The storm had softened to a whisper, a deceptive calm cloaking Ashwood Valley in thick layers of snow. But inside the cabin, tension coiled tight in Ethan's gut. Something felt wrong, off balance. Ghost, ever vigilant, hadn't moved from Leela's side all night. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps, too steady to be desperate. Not like Grace's had been. Ethan rose from the table in silence. He grabbed the pistol from the drawer beneath the sink, checked the safety, and tucked it behind his back. Ghost was already at the door, teeth bared in a low, rumbling growl Ethan had never heard from him before. He cracked the door just enough to see the man on the porch. Mid-30s, parka zipped high, hood up, face flushed from the cold. Snow crusted his shoulders. He looked like any stranded hiker, until Ethan noticed the boots. Tactical grade, military issue. "Hey," the man said, giving a nervous chuckle. "My truck slid off the road a few miles back. Radio's dead. I saw smoke from your chimney and figured." He gestured toward the cabin. "Storm's dying down." Ethan replied flatly, "You'll make it back on foot." The man's eyes flicked past Ethan, trying to peer inside. "Look, I'm not trying to bother you. Just need to warm up. Maybe use a phone, if you've got one." Ghost lunged against Ethan's leg with a vicious snarl, claws scraping the floorboards. The man stiffened. "Jesus, what's wrong with your dog?" Ethan narrowed his eyes. "He doesn't like liars." A pause. Then the man's friendly facade slipped, just for a second. "Enough." Ethan slammed the door shut, bolted it, then turned to Ghost. "Get Leela." The dog was already moving. Ethan dashed to the side window. Through a crack in the curtain, he saw the stranger circle the cabin, hands slipping into his jacket. Ethan followed suit, drawing his pistol. Outside, the man knelt beside the porch, digging into the snow. Seconds later, he pulled out a black case. Inside, a compact submachine gun and a blinking device, some kind of transponder. "Shit," Ethan muttered. He rushed to the living room. Leela stood barefoot, groggy but alert, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Ghost stood in front of her, muscles taut. Ethan knelt. "Sweetheart, listen to me. Someone bad is here. I need you to go with Ghost. Hide in the cellar. You remember the trapdoor?" Leela nodded. "Don't come out until I call for you. Not unless it's Ghost." "Got it, got it," she whispered. Ethan watched them disappear behind the kitchen cabinet that masked the old root cellar entrance. As the trapdoor closed, he turned back to the front of the house. The window shattered. The man was through it in seconds, rolling to his feet with practiced ease. Ethan fired once, grazing his arm. The intruder dove behind the couch, yelling, "We don't want you, Roe, just the asset." Ethan ducked behind the fireplace, breathing hard. Asset, Ghost, and Leela. More than a dog, more than a child. They were the pieces this man had come for. Or rather, the organization behind him. Echo Protocol wasn't a buried failure. It was still operational, and they wanted their test subjects back. The intruder popped up and fired a burst into the wall. "Stand down. Row, you're ex-military. You know how this works. She's a national security concern. Is that what you tell yourself?" Ethan shouted back. "That kidnapping a little girl is patriotic. She's the key. The dogs bonded to her. We've never seen full neural sync before. She's the trigger. So that was it. Ghost wasn't just some discarded experiment. He was the prototype of a biological interface, and Leela, somehow, was the match. Together, they completed the link Echo had only theorized. That was why Ghost could sense her seizures. Why he protected her like a part of himself. Another burst of gunfire tore through the cabin wall. Ethan flanked left. Fired again. Missed. The man rushed him. They crashed into the floor with a thud. Fists and elbows flying. The stranger was fast, trained, brutal, but Ethan fought like someone with everything to lose. He drove his knee into the man's side, twisted free, and grabbed the pistol just as the intruder reached for his own weapon. Gunshots echoed through the cabin. Then silence. Ethan staggered to his feet, panting, blood dripping from a cut above his brow. The intruder didn't move. His eyes were open, glassy. Ethan kicked the gun away, grabbed the transponder device, and crushed it under his boot. Seconds later, the trapdoor creaked open. Ghost emerged first, sniffed the air, then darted toward Ethan, checking his wounds. Behind him, Leela climbed up slowly, eyes wide. "Is he gone?" she asked. "He's not coming back," Ethan said. She nodded, trembling. Ghost nudged her gently, and she dropped to her knees, burying her face in his fur. Ethan scanned the room. Blood, broken glass, bullet holes. No longer just a safe house. It had become a battleground. And this was only the beginning. He turned back to the girl and the dog, two pieces of a mystery he no longer had the luxury to ignore. "We have to move," he said quietly. "They'll send more." Ghost looked up at him, eyes sharp and unwavering. Ethan met his gaze. "Let's find out who's hunting you." Morning came in fragments. Gray light filtered through broken windows, glinting off shattered glass and blood-streaked wood. The storm had passed, leaving behind a hollow silence across Ashwood Valley. Ethan stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the encrypted letter in his hand. The seal already broken. He had found it inside the intruder's pack, a small, waterproof pouch marked with a symbol only he and one other person would recognize, a stylized feather. Inked in blue. It was something only his sister, Leah, used when they were kids playing spy games. Something secret, something sacred. The letter was addressed to him in her handwriting. And even before decoding the embedded cipher, Ethan knew it was real. Her voice echoed from the ink. He decrypted it slowly, carefully, using the same key they'd created years ago. Her birth date combined with a phrase only they would know: "Never winter without fire." When he finished reading, his hands were shaking. "Ethan, if you're reading this, then I've failed. Or I've been silenced. Maybe both." Echo Protocol was never supposed to become what it is now. It began as a medical breakthrough, synchronizing trained canines with patients who suffered from neurological conditions. Ghost was the first success. He wasn't just trained, he was bonded, genetically, emotionally, neurologically. The process was unstable with adults. But with a child, there was potential. That child was mine. Her name is Leela. I kept her existence hidden from the project heads. I knew what they'd do if they found out. But eventually they did. That's why I left. Why I hid her. I sent her to Grace Monroe, the only person I trusted. She agreed to raise Leela as her own. Changed identities. Moved to Ashwood Valley. I arranged for Ghost to escape and find them, believing his bond to her would keep her safe. But Echo won't stop. Not while Leela breathes. Not while Ghost lives. He is the key, and she is the lock. You have to protect her. Ethan, I know I never told you everything. I didn't want to drag you into the dark I chose. But she's your family. Your niece. I'm sorry. Leah. Ethan sat down hard, the letter trembling in his hands. Leah. She hadn't abandoned her work. She had sacrificed everything, her career, her life, her child, to stop it. And now he knew why the girl in his cabin had felt like more than a stranger. She had his sister's spirit. Her eyes, her defiance. And Grace had known all along. She wasn't Leela's mother, she was her protector, a front to keep the child hidden from the world that created her. Ethan walked to the living room, where Leela sat bundled in a blanket, watching the snow fall with wide, thoughtful eyes. Ghost lay beside her, tail thumping once when Ethan approached. She looked up. Did the bad men go away? For now, Ethan said gently. Are more coming? Yes. He didn't lie. She nodded slowly, the way kids do when they've already guessed the truth. Ethan crouched beside her. Leela, do you know who your mom was? Not Grace, but the woman who had you before. Leela frowned. I think so. I used to dream about her. She had dark hair. She smelled like mint. She always wore a white coat. She was my sister, Ethan said. Her name was Leah. Leela blinked. Then you're my uncle? Yeah. His voice caught. I am. She was quiet for a long time. Then she looked at Ghost. Did she make him too? She trained him, and she made sure he found you. Leela reached out and rested her hand on Ghost's back. He always finds me. That night, Ethan prepared for what was coming. He burned the letter after memorizing it. Wired the cabin with silent alarms. Packed 2 emergency bags. Checked Ghost's GPS chip and removed it surgically with the precision of an old habit. There was no way the organization would stop with one operative. More would come, better trained, better armed. But Ghost was something they didn't understand. They had created him, yes, but they had failed to see the depth of his bond to the girl. He wasn't a weapon. He wasn't a tool. He was family. Leela had another seizure just before dawn. Small, brief. Ghost woke first, standing and whining low. Ethan reached her seconds later with her medication. It passed, as the others had, but something in Ghost's eyes had changed. He had felt it coming again. Not just smelled it. He knew. It was a connection Ethan couldn't explain. But he no longer needed to. Leah's words were clear. Ghost and Leela were inseparable, not by command, but by biology, instinct, love. And now that bond would cost them everything. Just after sunrise, the perimeter alarm chirped once. Movement. Ethan looked through the scope of his rifle. 5 figures in white camouflage, flanking the tree line, coordinated, armed, no visible insignia. They were here. He turned to Ghost and Leela. We're leaving. They moved fast, down the mountain trail Ethan had carved years ago as an escape route. The snow was thick, but the early light gave them enough visibility to stay ahead. Ghost led, sniffing for danger. Ethan carried Leela when she got tired, his rifle slung across his back. By midday, they reached an old ranger station, a fallback point. Safe for now. As Ethan sealed the door, he knew what Leah had truly given him, not just the truth, but the mission. Leela wasn't just a child. She was the proof Echo Protocol had succeeded, and that made her a target forever. But he was done running. He would burn Echo to the ground before they laid a finger on her. Snowmelt trickled through the pine needles, carving thin silver veins in the earth as winter loosened its grip on Ashwood Valley. The air at the old ranger station carried the scent of thawed soil and wood smoke. But the quiet was deceptive. Ethan Rowe had been a soldier too long to trust the calm. He and Leela had only just caught their breath when the storm caught up with them. Not wind or snow this time. But men, 5 of them, trained, silent, the kind that didn't ask questions. By the time the first shot hit the porch post, Ethan had Leela and Ghost moving through the back hatch. The ranger station's crawlspace led into a forested ridge, tight, close, full of deadfall and blind angles. It was a place to make a stand. But only if you knew every branch, every shadow. Ethan did. They made it halfway down the ridge when the ambush closed in. Flashbangs cracked the morning silence. Leela cried out, ears ringing. Ethan dragged her behind a fallen log, heart hammering. Ghost bolted forward, teeth bared, a blur of fur and fury. Go, Ethan barked, pushing Leela ahead. She hesitated, but only for a second, then obeyed. Tears streaking her cheeks. Ethan turned just in time to see Ghost slam into the lead assailant, ripping the rifle from his hands. A second man raised a pistol. Ethan fired, dropping him. The third got a shot off. Ghost didn't cry out. He didn't make a sound. He simply collapsed, mid-lunge, into the snow. No, Leela screamed. Ethan covered her, shielding her small frame with his body, firing 2 more rounds. 1 hit, 1 missed. The remaining men retreated, briefly, temporarily, but the cost was clear. Ethan crawled to Ghost, blood staining the white around the dog's chest. Breath shallow. He looked into Ethan's eyes, no fear, just clarity, and then he went still. Leela sobbed beside him, cradling Ghost's head, whispering things Ethan couldn't hear. The silence that followed was different. Not tactical, not strategic, just hollow. They buried Ghost under the shelter of a granite outcrop near the ranger station. The snow was softer there. Easier to dig. Leela placed her stuffed rabbit beside him. "So he won't be lonely," she said. Ethan couldn't speak. He just rested his hand on the mound and nodded. But Ghost's story wasn't over. Hours later, under the cover of darkness and silence, a figure emerged from the woods, a tall man in warm fatigues, face half covered in a scarf. He knelt beside the disturbed earth, brushed the snow aside, and opened a hidden panel beneath the rocks. Ghost lay inside, sedated, alive, barely, still stubborn. The man muttered, tapping Ghost's side gently, "Just like your handler." He lifted the dog into a thermal sling and disappeared into the woods. Back at the cabin weeks later, spring crept slowly into the valley. The trees budded, the river broke its ice. Birds returned in cautious song. Ethan and Leela did too. They'd stayed away for a while, traveling, laying low, following a trail of old contacts. The fire had burned behind Ethan's eyes every step of the way. But with Ghost gone, something had shifted in him. Anger had become something quieter, something heavier, something more permanent. But Leela kept him moving forward. She never stopped asking questions. Never stopped reminding him that Ghost had given her the one thing she'd never had before, someone who chose her. Every time. And now, Ethan had chosen her too. He stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching her dig a small hole in the soft soil just beyond the cabin. She moved slowly, carefully, the sapling cradled in a cloth beside her. It was no taller than she was. "What kind of tree is it?" he asked. "A sugar maple," she said without looking up. "Like the ones down by the river." He nodded. He liked those. She added, "The rustling leaves. I remember." She finished the hole and placed the sapling inside, packing the dirt with her small hands. Then she stood and stepped back. "This is for him," she said, "for the friend who saved me. And for you." Ethan raised a brow. "Me? You didn't just save me. Uncle Ethan. You stayed." She looked up at him. "You didn't have to, but you did." He didn't have an answer. Only the truth. "You saved me too, kid." He knelt beside her, placing a hand over hers as they both pressed the last of the soil into place. The wind picked up, stirring the new leaves. They rustled just once, soft, steady, like breathing. Leela looked at the horizon. "Do you think he's watching?" Ethan followed her gaze. "I know he is." Behind them, in a facility hidden deep in the forest, Ghost opened his eyes. His wounds were healing. His mind, once fractured by training and trauma, was stitching itself back together, slowly, but with purpose. The man beside him, Ethan's old ally, fed him gently, whispered instructions, ran diagnostic checks. "There's more to do," the man said. "They're not done hunting her." Ghost didn't bark, didn't move, but his eyes were locked forward, waiting. In Ashwood Valley, the maple tree stood against the sky, a quiet promise growing inch by inch.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.